Imagine losing an argument because your entire village simply walked away. That may sound childish, but in prehistory, separation could prevent something much worse. Without police, courts, or written laws, every disagreement became a community problem. A stolen tool could threaten hunting, food sharing, trust, and tomorrow's survival. So how did prehistoric people stop arguments from becoming dangerous feuds? The honest answer is complicated. Because prehistory covered thousands of different societies, no single Stone Age rulebook existed, and nobody carried a tiny lawyer. Still, archaeology and anthropology reveal several practical ways people managed conflict. Most solutions depended on reputation, relatives, sharing, distance, and group pressure. Violence happened, but it was costly, risky, and often socially disruptive. Ordinary people needed peace because cooperation kept fires burning and children fed. Let us enter one small camp and watch an argument unfold. Our camp stands near a river during the later Stone Age. About 30 people live there, moving whenever food and weather demand change. They hunt animals, gather plants, repair shelters, raise children, and exchange materials. Everyone knows everyone, including every embarrassing mistake from several winters ago. Privacy is limited when your walls are branches and your neighbors are cousins. Food is usually shared, because one hunter cannot eat an entire animal quickly. Sharing also creates obligations, friendships, and a useful safety net. Today you share meat. Tomorrow someone else finds roots during a bad hunt. That system works beautifully until people disagree about who contributed what. Meet Aruk, a patient hunter with a carefully polished stone blade. Meet Boro, another hunter who claims the blade was promised to him. Neither man has a receipt, because paper will not arrive for millennia. The blade matters because good stone tools require skill, time, and valuable material. Boro says he supplied the flint used to make it. Aruk says he shaped the blade and therefore owns it. Within minutes, relatives quietly gather around, pretending they are only stretching. Nobody wants a fight, but everybody wants the story. In a small camp, an argument becomes public almost immediately. People depend on cooperation, so appearing greedy can damage future support. A hunter with no friends may discover that dinner suddenly becomes very small. This is our first major conflict tool, reputation. Surprisingly, gossip may have controlled behavior more effectively than any prehistoric weapon. People could praise generosity, mock selfishness, or warn others about repeated cheating. Such pressure worked because survival often depended on being trusted. However, reputation alone cannot decide who actually owns the blade. Now an older woman named Senna steps between the hunters. She remembers earlier exchanges and has relatives in both families. Many small-scale societies use respected mediators, though authority varies widely. Senna is not a queen, judge, or prehistoric courtroom celebrity. Her influence comes from experience, memory, fairness, and valuable relationships. She asks each man to explain the dispute separately. This reduces shouting and prevents clever interruptions from becoming competitive sports. Aruk describes his work shaping, sharpening, and repairing the blade. Boro explains that rare flint came from his cousin's distant exchange journey. Senna then asks several nearby witnesses what they remember clearly. Memory can be imperfect, but several overlapping accounts create a clearer picture. One witness recalls Boro offering flint for 2 future hunting tools. Another remembers Aruk promising a spear point, not the finished blade. Now the disagreement looks less like theft and more like confused expectations. That distinction matters because communities respond differently to mistakes and deliberate cheating. Senna proposes compensation instead of declaring one absolute winner. Aruk keeps the blade but makes Boro a new spear point. Boro also receives extra meat from Aruk's next successful hunt. Both men dislike the solution, which often means mediation is working. A perfect victory might humiliate one side and create future revenge. A balanced compromise allows both people to keep dignity, Face-saving mattered because yesterday's opponent could become tomorrow's hunting partner. The group approves through nods, jokes, and several loudly expressed opinions. No official vote occurs, but collective agreement gives the settlement force. A rook cannot easily ignore everyone without hurting his reputation. Boro cannot restart the quarrel without appearing unreasonable. The camp returns to work, though gossip continues with impressive efficiency. Yet many prehistoric disputes probably ended far less smoothly. Several days later, another problem arrives with fewer polite words. A young gatherer named Tali accuses Koro of taking stored nuts. Koro denies everything and suggests mice should be questioned immediately. The camp has no fingerprints, cameras, or conveniently honest rodents. Stored food matters because scarcity can turn minor theft into serious danger. People first inspect the storage basket and nearby tracks. Physical evidence could influence decisions even without formal forensic science. The footprints are unclear, but Koro was seen near the shelter. Suspicion grows, especially because he previously borrowed food without asking. Here reputation returns, this time working against the accused. Past behavior can help communities judge risk, but it can also create unfair bias. Senna warns everyone not to punish Koro without stronger agreement. Her caution protects the group from turning rumor into irreversible revenge. Instead, the camp increases shared supervision around stored food. Koro must gather with others and cannot handle supplies alone temporarily. This resembles temporary social monitoring rather than any formal imprisonment. It reduces danger while avoiding a permanent break. Then Tali finds the missing nuts inside another basket. A child moved them while copying adults and forgot immediately. This small twist reveals something important about prehistoric justice. Good conflict management required flexibility because evidence could change unexpectedly. Communities that punish too quickly risk losing innocent and useful members. However, repeated theft could bring much harsher consequences. A persistent cheater might lose sharing rights, allies, or invitations to important tasks. In extreme cases, a person could be expelled from the group. Exile sounds less violent than execution, but it could be extremely dangerous. Alone, a person faced hunger, injury, predators, and hostile neighbors. Therefore, expulsion probably carried enormous social and practical weight. Still, camps often had another option before permanent exile. They could simply separate and establish different camps nearby. When conflict divided families, one group sometimes moved elsewhere. Anthropologists call this group fission, meaning a community splits into smaller units. Mobile life made separation easier than in a permanent farming village. Nobody needed to divide apartment furniture, although hunting territories still mattered. Fission reduced daily friction by creating physical distance. It also allowed offended relatives to leave without direct bloodshed. Surprisingly, walking away may have been one of prehistory's smartest peacekeeping strategies. Distance prevented insults from being repeated around the same fire nightly. Yet separation had costs, because smaller groups had fewer workers and defenders. A tiny band could struggle during poor weather or dangerous hunts, so people balanced peace against the benefits of staying together. Now imagine a more serious argument involving injury. During a hunt, Boro accidentally strikes Aruk with a thrown spear. Aruk survives, but his leg remains painful for several weeks. Was it truly an accident, or revenge for the blade dispute? Intent becomes central, although nobody can inspect Boro's thoughts. The group studies circumstances, witness accounts, and previous behavior. Boro threw while running, and another hunter confirms the animal changed direction. Most people eventually accept that the painful injury was accidental. Still, Aruk cannot hunt, so his family faces extra hardship. The solution focuses less on punishment and more on repair. Boro brings food, firewood, and materials to Aruk's household. His relatives also help, spreading responsibility across social connections. This resembles compensation found in many societies without centralized courts. Repairing damage can restore cooperation better than simply hurting the offender. Aruk's family receives support, while Boro publicly demonstrates responsibility. The arrangement also discourages careless behavior during future hunts. Nobody wants months of wood delivery because of one dramatic spear throw. Compensation could involve food, tools, ornaments, labor, or marriage arrangements. Exact practices varied across regions, periods, and communities. Prehistoric people were not one culture wearing matching animal skins. Some groups were highly mobile, while others built seasonal or permanent settlements. Leadership also varied from informal influence to more established authority. In many small groups, leaders persuaded rather than commanded. A skilled hunter might lead during hunting, but not settle family disputes. A respected healer could guide rituals without controlling food distribution. Authority was often situational, personal, and dependent on continued support. That meant unpopular leaders could not simply order everyone around forever. This limited power, though it did not eliminate bullying or inequality. Gender, age, family ties, and skill all shaped influence. Women likely played major roles in mediation, exchange, and household cooperation. Older people carried memories of earlier agreements and kin relationships. Children also mattered because disputes between adults affected future alliances. Here comes another surprise. Peace could be built through marriage and exchange networks. Partnerships connected families, making violence more costly for everyone involved. If your rival's sister raised your nephew, revenge became socially complicated. Gift exchange also transformed strangers into partners with mutual obligations. Shells, stone, pigments, and ornaments traveled across surprisingly long distances. These networks provided materials, information, marriage partners, and refuge during crises. Breaking trust could therefore damage far more than one local friendship. But what happened whenever careful discussion and mediation completely failed? Sometimes people used controlled contests, public challenges, or ritualized fighting. Evidence varies, and we should avoid imagining one universal prehistoric duel. In some later traditional societies, opponents fought under social rules and observation. Such contests could channel anger without starting unlimited revenge. The goal was not always to destroy the opponent. It could prove courage, release tension, or establish a temporary settlement. However, controlled violence could still cause severe injuries. Humans are remarkably talented at turning rules into emergencies. Archaeological skeletons show healed fractures, embedded projectiles, and occasional lethal trauma. These remains confirm that prehistoric violence was real, not a peaceful fantasy. Yet injuries also healed, showing that survivors often received long-term care. That care required food, protection, and patience from other people. A badly injured person could not recover alone beside a motivational cave painting. Therefore, even violent societies depended heavily on cooperation. Large massacres occurred in some prehistoric contexts, especially around territorial pressure. Other communities show much less evidence of organized violence. Patterns changed with population density, resources, climate, and settlement style. Farming later increased stored wealth, fixed land, and new reasons for conflict. Before farming, mobility sometimes allowed groups to avoid dangerous rivals. After farming, fields and houses could not simply walk away. Still, even hunter-gatherers defended territories, water sources, and social boundaries. We should neither romanticize them nor portray constant chaos. Most days probably contained ordinary cooperation, teasing, work, childcare, and small disagreements. Serious violence attracts archaeologists because bones record trauma better than peaceful conversations. Unfortunately, kindness rarely leaves a dramatic hole in a skull. Archaeology, therefore, gives an uneven picture of prehistoric social life. Burials can reveal care, status, relationships, and sometimes unusual treatment. But burials rarely explain exactly why two neighbors argued. Rock art offers rich symbolism, but no clear transcripts of mediation meetings.
Tools and settlements show cooperation, planning, and repeated shared activity.
That evidence suggests people constantly coordinated behavior and expectations. Language must have been crucial, though spoken words vanished completely. Storytelling likely preserved reputations, warnings, agreements, and lessons about dangerous behavior. Humor may also have lowered tension and corrected arrogance. In many societies, ridicule discourages boasting without requiring formal punishment.
A greedy hunter might face jokes sharper than his best stone blade.
Yet humor works only when people recognize shared rules. It can unite a group, but it can also shame vulnerable individuals. Another misconception says prehistoric elders always controlled every decision. Some elders held influence, but age alone did not guarantee obedience. People respected useful knowledge, fairness, generosity, and strong relationships. Another myth imagines disputes always ended through brutal combat.
Violence existed,
But constant fighting would destroy small cooperative communities. People needed methods that preserved hunters, gatherers, caregivers, and skilled toolmakers. A final misconception treats prehistoric societies as simple and socially identical. They were diverse, adaptive, political, emotional, and often surprisingly sophisticated. The biggest lesson is that conflict resolution began long before written law. Humans managed arguments using tools already available inside social life. They used memory, reputation, mediation, compensation, ritual, humor, and distance. None of these methods worked perfectly because humans remained wonderfully difficult. Yet each method reduced the costs of endless revenge. Peace was not merely kindness, it was practical survival technology. A trusted partner increased food security, protection, knowledge, and future opportunities. An enemy inside a tiny camp threatened everyone's daily routine. So communities pushed disputants towards solutions preserving cooperation whenever possible. Sometimes the solution repaired harm through labor or shared resources. Sometimes it restored dignity through apology, ceremony, or public agreement. Sometimes it meant separating before anger became deadly. And sometimes, tragically, every available peaceful option still failed. Prehistoric life was neither constant harmony nor endless club-swinging chaos. It was a complicated human world, shaped by necessity and relationships. The people involved felt anger, embarrassment, fear, loyalty, and stubborn pride. In other words, those prehistoric people were extremely recognizable humans. Modern courts are newer, but many underlying goals remain familiar. We still seek evidence, fairness, repair, deterrence, and social peace. We still argue about ownership, responsibility, accidents, and suspicious missing snacks. The scenery changed, but the basic human problem survived. Perhaps civilization began not when people stopped arguing, but when they managed arguments. After all, cooperation built camps, exchange networks, migrations, and eventually cities. So next time someone steals your snack, remember Koro and the innocent child. Ask for evidence before declaring a full family feud, and consider the oldest solution of all: talking before throwing anything. But which prehistoric conflict changed human society most dramatically? That question leads directly toward warfare, farming, and the first fortified settlements.